What exactly did Videodrome do to Max Renn's body? What subtle yet crucial details might you have missed during those grotesque scenes of his flesh transforming, and what will Max Renn ultimately become? The answers to these and other compelling questions about David Cronenberg's Videodrome are explored in this video. Don't forget to subscribe and support this video with your activity. It really means a lot to me. Imagine watching television and suddenly it responds to you with a flash. As strange as that sounds, you stare at the screen and feel something inside you beginning to change on a physiological level. Mental fog, bizarre dreams, even hallucinations. And then, at some point, a wound opens on your abdomen. Except it's not really a wound, it's a pulsating organic video cassette slot. And anatomically, you're no longer human. You're a biomechanical extension of television. You are the next stage of human evolution. Welcome to the reality of the new flesh. Yes, that's one way to sum up what's happening in this iconic body horror film, Videodrome. But before we dive into a detailed analysis of Max Renn's physical transformation, I must first outline one very important detail that'll shape the rest of this breakdown, my personal interpretation of the events. Given the theme of this video, I think it's best to start here, not end here. Because how we interpret what's shown on screen, especially the body horror, depends on this framework. Videodrome is a narratively complex film full of layered meanings and subtext. It also invites the viewer to create their own interpretation, but broadly speaking, the movie revolves around two core ideas. The first suggests that everything in the film is just a personal hallucination of Max Renn, that is, the entire story is a psychotic journey of a man who simply lost his grip on reality. His psychological instability is a puzzle composed of personal, professional, and of course, media overload. His prolonged exposure to violent TV content has also contributed to his mental breakdown. All the bodily transformations are metaphors for this psychosis. He can no longer distinguish fact from fiction. He becomes manipulated and ultimately goes all the way to be reborn in the new flesh. At least that's what he believes, but in reality, perhaps he's just sitting in his room talking to a television set. The second idea, which I personally favor and will stick with in this video, is science fiction based, simply because I love sci-fi. Max Renn runs a small television channel that specializes in broadcasting content that skids the edge of morality. Sex, violence, and when it's both at once, well, anything for ratings. But Max is looking for a new format, something sensational. That's when he stumbles upon a broadcast of a show called Videodrome, an extremely realistic depiction of torture and violence. Exactly what he's been looking for. And he does everything he can to bring it to his network.
It's for real. It's not acting. It's snuff TV.
As the story unfolds, we learn that Videodrome is actually a deliberately engineered audiovisual signal designed to stimulate a specific region of the brain, triggering hallucinations. But these hallucinations aren't just hallucinations. Videodrome erases the boundaries between mind and flesh. The hallucinations are so vivid that the brain begins to believe in them completely. Max Renn believes in his new flesh. Maybe not immediately, but eventually, without a doubt. The new flesh becomes his reality, even if no one else sees it. Videodrome is also a tool of control, primarily through organic transformation. And yes, as implied by the film's final scenes, Videodrome is a far broader entity than what we see on screen. Initially, Videodrome isn't just about mind manipulation through violent imagery. That's only one possible algorithm of influence. It's one that targets individuals like Max Renn, people who are easily tuned into its frequency. But the most important implication, again hinted at in the final scenes, is that Videodrome possesses its own consciousness, its own will. And various people are trying to use it for their own purposes. Ultimately, Videodrome is vast and complex, but whatever the details, its true goal is clear. Long live the new flesh. And that's what we're exploring today through the body of Max Renn. Now, yes, in terms of actual physical transformations, there aren't that many in the film, but the few scenes we do get are packed with fascinating anatomical details worth analyzing. One evening, Max is watching television again. He's viewing a tape with new information about Videodrome, and in these scenes, Max begins to realize that he is merely flesh, subservient to video. At this point, Max may not have noticed the scar on his abdomen, but he feels an itch there. In reality, itching is the nervous system's way of telling us that something's wrong, maybe inflammation or minor tissue damage. In Max's case, it's similar, but with one major difference. His nervous system has no idea what's actually happening inside his torso. Beneath that scar, real organic reconstruction is already underway. The skin is thinning, blood vessels are retreating deeper. But that's nothing compared to the transformation happening in his abdominal muscles and internal organs. Soon, Max sees an opening on his stomach, what becomes the organic videocassette slot. And by all appearances, whatever this is, it's a new organ. Inside, we no longer see recognizable human anatomy. It's something entirely new. Flesh shaped like technology. From an anatomical standpoint, we can highlight several major changes in Max's body. First, the formation of a channel in the abdominal wall. The muscle fibers are weakening and pulling apart, losing firmness, gaining elasticity. Essentially, we're witnessing the creation of a new muscle group, what we might call circular musculature, capable of contracting and expanding. Additionally, parts of Max's abdominal muscles seem to have transformed into mucous membrane, rich in nerve endings, judging by his future pain responses. No surprise given that this area's main function becomes the intake and retention of objects. As for the internal organs, there's clearly displacement and compression of the intestines. The small intestine retracts deeper into the body to make room. During activation of the videocassette slot, digestion becomes irrelevant. The body reallocates resources, digestion becomes secondary. But the most interesting part is this. Max's new organ is essentially a new part of the central nervous system, alongside the brain and spinal cord. It looks alive for a reason, and it has to be part of the CNS because his enemies use it to program him with specific commands. They insert pulsating videocassettes into it. Yes, Cronenberg loves things that pulsate. Another striking moment, when Max sees this abdominal port for the first time, he instinctively places a gun into it, almost against his will. He hides it inside himself, and curiously he spends quite a bit of time trying to find a spot for it. For a good reason. The port isn't meant for such items. The gun is a foreign object, and when Max finally manages to insert it, the port doesn't want to release his hand. For the same reason, it wasn't designed for this. But flesh obeys the mind, not the other way around, even if the mind resists. Eventually, the port accepts the gun. Over time, this new organ evolves. It adapts. It becomes what we might call a flesh defense system, not only obedient to Max's will, but capable of acting autonomously. Later in the film, one of Max's enemies attempts to insert a command tape into the port, but the port processes the tape, turns it into an organic grenade, and implants it into the attacker's forearm. In other words, the port becomes a tool of aggressive flesh rewriting the body like a magnetic tape. Quite fitting for an organic cassette deck. Another iconic scene, Max's hand fuses with a gun, forming a single techno-organic unit. Again, we see fascinating anatomical clues. When Max first removes the gun from his body, it's covered in mucus, a preservative lubricant his body produced to keep the gun intact in an alien environment. And the reason the gun begins to fuse with his hand isn't that his enemies programmed him to kill. It's that his flesh is already familiar with it. Now that Max is holding it again, the body no longer needs to preserve it in its original form. It can finally initiate the fusion process. There is some inconsistency. Throughout the rest of the film, Max places the gun back into his abdomen multiple times, switching between fused and normal hand states. Let's chalk that up to cinematic stylization. The fusion occurs via cables emerging from the gun and embedding into Max's flesh. These cables serve two purposes. First, to create a neural link between the gun and Max's brain. He now fires it mentally, not with a trigger. Second, to form nutritional pathways, perhaps even a rudimentary circulatory system. The gun is now part of his body. It needs sustenance too.
Get the Videodrome! Long live the new flesh!
But the most important takeaway from these scenes is that they show what Max Renn is becoming, what his new flesh truly is. As we see in the film's conclusion, Max doesn't die, he is reborn. He sheds his old body to embrace the new. He opens his flesh fully to Videodrome. Notice that the cables from the gun reach beyond his hand, perhaps even beyond his forearm. Every time Max picks up the gun, the cables go deeper. He becomes more of a human-tech hybrid. What we see in his right hand is only a glimpse of what his entire body will eventually become. And again, the film tells us this stage of transformation is just the beginning. Future changes will follow the same path, only on a much larger scale. What will Max Renn do after rebirth? Will he become part of Videodrome or fight against it? We don't know, but one thing is certain, he's ready for a long life in the new flesh. If you enjoyed this video, please subscribe and support it with your activity, it means a lot to me.